Yeah,
Okay.
I
Let's
was just
start
saying,
let's
yeah.
just get started with this, and that is that the Buddha said that the ordinary mind burns by day and smolders by night, and that it's still a fire, but it smolders by night, and that you're saying that your smoldering is more like real fire.
Yeah, I find even if I'm not taking the right steps to meditate and calm my mind, I wake up and my mind somehow both going super fast and super crazy, and at the same time it's super dull and hazy. Behind the haze, I can tell it's just running and churning, but at the same time, it's not clear either. And as the day progresses, my mind actually just settles down. And if I have to do some work, I am far more productive later at night than I am right after waking up because I just can't focus in the morning. Um, and then especially if I meditate, it really calms down and it really concentrates. And if I have one sit in the morning and one sit in the evening, my access to the jhanas, it's a noticeable pattern that I have much better access to first jhana and second jhana in the evening sit than in the morning sit. And this has been really a pattern for me for the pretty much past 2 years that I've been meditating.
Okay, that that's very interesting. It's um, it's generally not the norm either for the general population, which is generally not much aware of what's happening anyway, or the yogi. So one of the things to say is that you're beginning to figure things out. You're beginning to notice things that most people don't even know about. They don't even have the meditation experience to be able to start watching these things cycle over time. And so that's good. I'm
Hmm.
congratulating you for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's very
It's
good.
a, it's kind of a waking up,
Hmm.
all right? And so um, now what we can do is to say, okay, there are actual some things that can be done for and about sleeping, because the Buddha talked about um, the four postures. That sitting is the one that people get so stuck in that even in the Goenka retreat, they don't do walking meditation.
Hmm.
But generally, walking meditation in its simplest form is to go barefoot and watch every step. Watch where you're going. If you're going barefoot, you're much more likely to watch where you're stepping than if you got boots on. And then we can have that analogy for the mind. If we've got boots on in the mind, and then we go, and those boots in that sense is all of the old protections that we have built up over time, the sankara. And so we
Hmm.
stomp through life without taking note of every step. So here you are beginning to take note of what's going on. And so that's the whole aspect. So you're certainly going in the right direction. Now, the sitting posture is only one of four postures that the Buddha talked about: the, the sitting, the walking, the standing, and the one that we're about to look at closely is the reclining posture or the laying down posture that is normally called the lion's posture or the lion pose. You can Google this under a whole lot of different names, including the reclining Buddha, and get dozens and dozens of images that have been set out over time. Some of them are more accurate than others, but basically, it's a very relaxed, stretched out fetal position, and that you're laying on your side, generally they recommend the right side, but there's also reasons to have the left, and that means that there's good reason to have two different postures to make some choices with. And in fact, that's the way then to begin to look at it, that you assume this lion's pose with the intention that if the body comes out of that pose, you will wake up and change that position back into the lion's pose so that you can begin to maintain that even while you're asleep. And the body stirring out of the posture that it's in is quite a movement enough um, to bring up sati, especially if that's the intention when going to sleep. So,
I'm just Googling this pose. I see it now.
okay. You will probably find at least one, but perhaps not more than that are all on the right side. But the left side also has advantages, almost in a mirror-like form, with one additional point is that the heart is at a low five. And so when it's pumping blood to the brain, it's a very easy path to go with. And so even doctors recommend patients in certain situations to park themselves that way. Now, here's the original history of it has to do with that if you are having the habit of sleeping on your back with such a hard surface, if you're sleeping on the ground or whatever, then that makes breathing a bit difficult. And if you're sleeping on your chest with your whole body weight, that's even more difficult to breathe. That it's better to get up off of the chest and get to the side so that we can breathe better. And then the knees are slightly bent, though many of the images won't show the bend. And then the knees are, the ankle is one draped over the other, so that you just lay there in a very comfortable position. But the intention is to always, whenever you think about it, to return to that posture, so that when you begin to change posture, the way that I was doing it just last night, I thought I was about to explain, is that I'm in on the right side in the lion's pose, and then I wake up to start taking some deep breaths as I'm moving over to the left side, and then I go back into rest and sleep, and then a little while later the whole thing happens again, always with the intention and the consciousness that while after I've rolled over, while I'm going back to sleep, is to take deep breaths, to be there with it, especially if the lungs are already infected with stuff so that it's causing bronchitis or whatever. That's the time to breathe. And so that becomes part of the night, so that happens 8, 10, 12 times in the night. And that's a much, much better way then to breathe and be able to get rested, because even with that, I feel quite good today. I still have the symptoms, but the life force comes back by plainly practicing that breathing over and over and over again, putting oneself to sleep while still doing that deep breathing. So if that becomes your intention through the night, then you will also find it much easier to start dealing with that smoking fire that you've got going, whether you're awake or asleep. It can down in the daytime, and then somehow it gets all smoky during the night. So paying much more attention to body posture and breathing and going right back to the body will help take a lot of the force out of what's going on in the mind. so that
Yeah.
perhaps the mind can get more rest.
Yeah, and in fact, I've already begun to notice little habits of if I'm experiencing some dukkha while I'm lying down in bed, or my mind's already agitated for whatever reason. um, I notice that I end up shifting my body into a less comfortable posture that doesn't allow for deep breathing, for example, on my chest. Whereas if I didn't have that dukkha and I was less agitated, I'm much more likely to lie in a posture that allows me to breathe deeply. So it's almost like I'm working against myself when things are already agitated. The sort of natural habit is just to make it worse in an attempt to escape it or something. If
Exactly.
I
And that's especially when the human being is operating off a set of instincts that don't match the situation. In other words, we're completely out of that kind of society. One of the reasons why we naturally go into bad postures um, is because of it's hiding. Ostriches putting their head necks in the sand or
mm,
burying our head
mm,
into it or whatever like that. Oh, I don't, it's like protection from incoming bombs, and that we want to protect that part of the body. And then they get into that kind of a sleeping pose, which is not healthy.
yeah,
So that's good
um,
awareness. Yes, to recognize while I'm talking about the lion's pose, you recognize, oh, I've been doing something else and it's not particularly
mhm.
useful.
And I think and there's like I think this is a pattern that happens not just for sleeping, but if I have some, like, it's like I have a level of resilience, and if the stress I'm experiencing is less than what I can put up with or what I can deal and handle with, or I think I can handle, I deal with it appropriately and I reduce it and I'm mindful and I center my attention and I bring it down. And the second it goes above that level, it's almost like my mind goes into it starts doing the exact wrong things that it should do, and it starts trying to avoid and escape and let me start playing some video games, which just makes my mind even more agitated. Um, yeah, and it's almost like an unstable equilibrium. If it's here, it goes down. If it's here, it goes. And this level of resilience is gradually increasing. And I hope that one day there's just a mental shift where I realize, it doesn't matter how much stress I have. I still want it to go down. I don't want to do the
Yeah,
wrong thing.
the Buddha has a very important statement of exactly that. But the language is different. So hear what the Buddha is saying, and then we will reconcile these two. Um, this is actually the first knowledge, and the first knowledge in the sense of the first step of Sotapan. In this regard, is this is in Sutta number 48, and the first thing that he does is he discusses the hindrances. He discusses what's this stuff down here. And then he mentions about um, that no matter how much there is of this stuff, how many hindrances or how big they are still not so big that we can wake up and say, oh no, I'm in charge here. No matter how obstructed the mind gets, I can clean that stuff out and come back to the present moment. That's actually a sutta. And he then says that this is noble. This is super mundane. This is a factor of the path. And this is not shared by ordinary people.
Mm.
Okay. So, in fact, this is now the process of you stopping your ordinary people
Mm-hmm.
and coming into becoming noble minded. This is precisely the process,
Yeah.
so that you can come to the conclusion it doesn't matter how bad my mind gets messed up. All I have to do is wake up to that mess. And I'm the boss here now. I'm in charge of this. Down, boy. You are no longer the boss. Now, we're not trying to kill the poor darn thing. It's part of our instinctual nature, and it's going to be handy from time to time. It's like a barking dog. When the house gets broken into, you want the dog to bark.
Mm-hmm.
But when you figure out what it is, then you want the dog to shut up. And so that's the wake up time, is to shut up, dog. How do we shut the dog up? We treat the dog very well. Down, boy. Good job. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
we begin to see that feeling system that keeps the mind spinning like that. I've got you. I see you. And I'm going to take a breather now and come back to the state of meditation that I've had sometime during the day. Take a deep breath and relax. And so you can actually practice that also during the night, because that's actually practicing correctly is built into that deep breath. Going through all of that stuff, the cleaning out of the mind and being so free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a way, you could say that when the mind is asleep in turmoil, that we wake up just enough to create first jhana state, finish the situation, and go back to sleep. And the
Huh.
mind is
Interesting.
quiet.
I've had before talking to you, I had that thought of, because I remember waking up at like 3 a.m. and my mind was racing, and I tried to go back to sleep, and I went back to sleep, but it wasn't a particularly restful sleep. And so the next day I kind of thought it would have been almost better if I just had gotten up, sat, and just meditated until my mind calmed down again to the first jhana state, and then gone back to sleep. And it just would have been more restful and just a better
Mhm.
use of my time.
And when you get used to it, it's a matter of just rolling over.
Mm,
Hmm. Out of the hindrances into a pleasant state.
yeah.
There you sit there or lie there breathing well. Everything's hunky dory. Everything is sabai, sabai. And we go right to sleep. You don't have to get up and sit and make it a big deal.
Yeah. Cool. Lately in my sits, I've been practicing metta. Um, I did a couple meditations that had to do with sort of visualizing perfect parents and how they would relate to you. And I noticed that that seemed to have a very powerful effect in terms of bringing up memories and kind of memories in of things that happened in my childhood. And so I don't know. So I just kind of, from that, my intuition kind of led me to start practicing metta. Uh, uh, and so I've been doing that lately. I still usually start with breathing and deep breathing. And then once I do a little bit of breathing, I switch to doing metta. I've been following this book, but I think it's called The Path to Nibbana by David Johnson, and he's a student of Bhante V. Uh, Bhante Vimalaramsi, I think.
Vilamaramsti, okay. All right.
And this book details using metta to go through the jhanas, and I'm having good success with it. I'm consistently getting to first jhana and less consistently to second. Um, and then again, it has this kind of added benefit that if I'm noticing, like, even just the sensation of when I do metta with a friend, I imagine sending it and I also imagine receiving it. And I'm noticing that all these kind of things kind of I don't know. It's been very it's been quite effective in certain ways. And then the one other thing that's pretty central to the teachings is what he calls the 6R method. And I've been using that not just for metta, but also for anapanasati. And the 6R method is how to deal with distractions. And it's the R's are recognize, release, relax, re-smile, return, and repeat. And this is really similar. That's sati, and then that's sort of tranquilize or releasing the distraction, the hindrance. Then there's relaxing, which is kind of tranquilizing the body and mind. Then there's re-smile, which adds joy back into it, and then return, which is like right effort to put yourself back onto the present moment or the breath or whatever. So it's very similar, but just having those steps has been really useful for me because now I always do it. And I noticed that I used to sometimes skip a step. Sometimes I wouldn't do the re-smile. Sometimes I wouldn't do the relax. And now that I make sure I do it each time, that's been really helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad that you're able to get good benefit. First thing to say is every student has many teachers, no matter what the topic. Like you didn't do a school where you had the same school teacher in first grade and second grade and third grade. No, no, no. The teachers stay and you move. And so, in that regard, you've had many teachers in your life. And so, working together with that is not a problem. And in fact, whoever's saying whatever, if they're either saying it correctly or not, and if they're saying it correctly, then we can find really easy agreement. Or if they're not correct, we can plug some of their holes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a good way. No problem with that. Got no problem with that. So that's an interesting way of putting it. But that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so let's go back and talk about one of the things you said about metta. Uh, the way that people say it is often, like you mentioned, is that it's something that they don't have and that you would offer it, but you don't have it either. That it's an aspiration for both of us. And that's generally how metta is taught. But a more realistic way of it is that the joy or the re-smile or whatever that whole combination was in those R's actually is the process of making some real good quality metta right here in the right here now. Okay. Then that good stuff is what's worth sharing. But that good stuff then is still
Mm-hmm.
the first jhana because if it's that good, then it certainly has success. It has satisfaction. It has safety. It has all of that stuff built right into it. And so in the
Exactly. Yeah.
same and so in the same language, that good stuff is then the metta that is what you want to bestow on the entire environment around you so that you become kind of a hub of metta in an outgoing direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that metta spread is also a way of getting in contact with our environment because we do it in that regard through the senses. That spreading out is spreading out of our own senses with love and affection and joy and goodwill and congratulations and the roar of a lion and all of that stuff built into it that is this current existence. So when we practice metta in that way, it expands our little universe, that the body itself begins to grow into our environment. And so we become bigger through through that practice of metta, that it actually does expand our consciousness, or at least it expands our view of the world. So you could call it the world view is what really gets expanded. Or if we want to sprinkle a little magic in, we can say it's consciousness that's being expanded. So by doing this, metta is built into the practice, but you really have to grow it from the inside so that you can then grow it even bigger than that outside. It's not something that is not a wish of may all beings be happy. It's be happy, damn you.
Yeah.
So the way then that we see compassion is through that same overview, that we grow as our consciousness expands, or as our worldview expands. We begin to see others in the levels of their suffering, not only in general, but specific friends and people as they move in and out of states of suffering. You can see it. When people are lying to you, you can see it. All you have to do is note it well, see it. So in this regard, that becomes our compassion, is to be able to see what's happening with other people. Because that's dukkha also. And if you don't watch out, you'll step right into it. Many of them laying traps for you. Just like we lay little traps for ourselves throughout the night. Okay. So, actually, not just throughout the night, but at any time. That Eric Berne calls it game playing in transactional analysis, so that people set it up to wind up in bad feelings. This is all unconscious. Examples of those kind of games would be, let's you and him fight. Or let's pull a fast one on Joey. And there's many different kinds of individual games that people play. But let's not get into that part of psychology so much as to recognize that metta then is going to be used as an outgrowth of anapanasati to be kind of a wipe-all that you can clean things up with, to not leave the world such a dirty place, but clean up your image of what the world really is through compassion, beginning to expand our worldview so that we can see things in general much more clearly. And then in regard to that, there is mudita, which is normally said as sympathetic joy. And sympathetic joy, is, well, I've heard many different definitions of it, but if you've got this metta, you can use it at any point in time as joy and spread joy wherever you go. I've even practiced doing that in the dentist office. A remarkable effect. Because the dentist office, everybody's either very much afraid for one reason or another. There's a lot of fear in there. Quiet place, everybody is disturbed, nobody's feeling good. But there's ways of spreading joy, especially if you've got a little kid around. Because you can get their attention, then you can get a smile out of them, and then you've got some adult's attention, and then you can begin to play with the kid, and soon enough the whole place comes out. They begin to see the playfulness of this moment rather than the terror that they've got running in their mind. This is a way of spreading joy, is to help people get out of their misery once you've gotten out of yours.
Yeah, I've been noticing that I have a difficult time making that switch. What I notice my mind does, especially in social situations, is I can I can recognize that I'm caught up in something. I need a moment. I'll wait. I'll do some breathing. I'll bring myself out of the whatever unpleasantness, and then it's almost like I don't like I've noticed that if I then take the attention off of whatever that internal story of what's bothering me and I just try to have fun with the people around me and make jokes or just, just spread kind of send out like positive energy, just have a good energy to myself. Uh, that's awesome, and that works very well, and that pulls me even more away from whatever story it is. But I've noticed that usually what happens is I do the breathing, I let go of the story, and then I'm there for just a moment, and then the story just comes back. And if I'm active and I jump into the social situation and I start interacting with other people, the story doesn't have any room to come back. Um, but there's an inertia there. There's an inertia to, okay, now I'm good. I don't have dukkha anymore. I'm satisfied. But there's an inertia to then sending that out, I think. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. Good. Congratulations for that. And one other thing is that um, this is precisely what you're doing there in a social situation is what is the beginner does right from the very beginning. And that is to uh, come out of the hindrances, gladden the mind, take a deep breath, come back to the here now, and interact marvelously with what's happening right this very minute. And so then you go to the social situation and you do precisely the same thing.
Mm.
If you can remember to get out of our own way, is one of the ways of saying it.
Yeah. And it seems like this kind of idea of fun, I'm not really sure where that fits into the Buddha's teachings, but it kind of I mean it's about spreading joy. And so I've been trying to kind of there's like a silliness to fun. Um, if I there's kind of almost like a im, impracticality, or like there's when you're having fun, there's no problem to solve, and so you're not in this problem solving mind, and so then you're not thinking about the next step or the next thing that we have to do or whatever. It's just about whatever, and it can get kind of silly, and it's very hard for me to do that. But when I do it, I notice it's very effective. Um, and it can be as silly as just saying something random very loudly. It doesn't really matter what you're saying. The problem solving mind wants to focus on what are you saying, why is that fun, why is that funny, but it's less to do with that and more to do with just your demeanor. Anyway, so I've been trying to figure out how to make that flip. um,
Okay, let's talk about that part of the mind that is trying to say no, no, no to you because there's something in there. What was it that you said? Why are you
um,
doing this and what is meaning of that, etc. That was.
um, yeah, I feel like, and I think this might just be a sort of subtle form of fear. And in fact, I think that is what it is fear. I think once I've pulled myself out of the hindrances, at least somewhat, to be silly, to be loud or expressive, or to attempt to spread joy, there's a fear of rejection. There's a fear of, I'm gonna make a joke and it's not gonna be funny. There's there's this sense of, oh, I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to spread joy in this situation. Um, yeah, it's
It's actually that easy. Just bust out in laughter.
mhm,
That really is a showstopper. However, getting back to the presence of mind, I was actually going after the voices that you hear that stop you from doing that, and you immediately went one level down into fear. And so let's uh, go back up a level to those voices are the voices that are referred to in our own clinging to rites, rules, and rituals, or behave yourself or do it the way that it should be. And that Eric Berne calls this the parent ego state, and that Freud called it the super ego. Okay, which if whatever the ego is, if this is the ego, then the super ego is seen this way. All right, so it's the rule base, or our, if you will, socialization.
yeah,
Okay, the Buddha calls this sila bhatta paramasa, and it actually means attachments to rites, rules, and rituals, but I'm giving it a very long, broad definition of all rites, all rules, and all rituals build a society. That a society is nothing but a set of ways of doing things, social interactions that can be specified and written down in a long, long list of behaviors. And that human society then would be an amalgamation of all of these things. And as we become more global, that list then will also become more globalized so that things that used to be okay are not okay. For instance, the Westerners doing a handshake may, in fact, give way to namaste worldwide, so that that becomes a worldwide kind of gesture. But I'm pointing to both of them as being part of this sila bhatta paramasa. It's the way to do things. And that part of that is what's there in your mind trying to prevent you from being silly or really enjoying the moment or being playful or singing right out loud, is that
yeah,
voice in there that all of these folks would then call that, each one in his own way, that's your parent ego state. That's your set of internal regulations and rules.
yeah.
And
So
you
I
should
think,
start paying attention to that stuff also.
yeah,
Almost
yeah, yeah,
in a
yeah.
way is that the one who wants to go yippee ki the one who wants to play, is actually the id in Freud, or the child in Berne, or it's the natural, joyful, playful self. There's not a self, it's just a playful mechanism, the joy of life. And
hmm
that springs up. But normally in our society, it's suppressed. That people are not supposed to have fun,
Yeah.
supposed to work.
I Yeah, and I think this is, I think yeah, it's exactly this. I think that wherever this fear is coming from is there's some rule in my head that if I say the wrong thing, or if I don't express myself in a particular way, uh, I won't get something from my parent or from my friends or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I become a little frozen, And really, at a kind of more logical level, I know my friends well. I know that they would be, I've made stupid jokes that they didn't find funny before, and it doesn't hurt the relationship at all, So
It just adds a new dimension to the relationship. Exactly. But these
yeah,
old rule-making thoughts are still in there trying to protect you because they are already laid in place in the situation of danger. Because they were
yeah,
laid down in danger, that means that they were associated with danger. That's why you're actually calling it fear. Well, of course it's fear. This is the voice of fear.
yeah.
The voice of fear is our rites, rules, rituals, and in another regard, it's what is called the nesting instinct.
What is
And
that?
here's how it becomes the nesting instinct is because we are social animals. We are a herd. We're part of a herd, and that if uh, in a small herd or group or a large one, if you become ostracized from that group, your life becomes quite dangerous. On a herd, the outsider is the one that the lion is most likely to take down, not the ones in the middle of the herd. That whole quality of herding for protection is what gives rise to the greed for money, because they think that money is going to protect them, and it never does. But that money then makes them powerful around the others so that they can then kind of put themselves in the middle of their own herd for protection. So when you begin to see that mechanism inside, you can say, wait a minute, that's the bondage. There are actually no real lions out there. Why don't I go take a hike and see what's going on in my life? And so
Mm.
we're ready to leave the herd. That
I've noticed, and this kind of, I think this almost exactly relates back to why I kind of started doing metta, is because I did some exercises where I would imagine a parent, and the parent would say things like, "I love you no matter what,"
mm-hmm.
no, this kind of unconditional love. Um, and I've even noticed, when I've gotten really into these YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always young people making these YouTube videos, and they're breaking the rites and rituals. And so one genre I've discovered is there's people singing in public, and that's the whole video. They might just have their headphones on, and they're just singing along to their music as they're walking down the street. And that's, there's tons of videos just like this. And it kind of it represents this free, and I think that's why I'm so interested in these videos, is because they're free of the rites and rituals so clearly. They're doing something that I never see outside in my own neighborhood. Nobody does that, but these guys are just going around singing loudly. Um, and yeah, so it's really, it's cool to see, and yeah, and I've even started using my phone a little bit in kind of this way. There's apps where you can share videos of yourself, and I've started sharing videos just because I notice I'm insecure about how I'm presenting myself, how I look, how I talk, how I speak. Um, and so it's kind of all
You
related.
can change that just a little bit into how often do I smile? How often do I chuckle? How often do I nod my head yes and no? How often do I wink and agree? These are the new things to look for.
Mm,
Why? Because you've already got all the self confidence. You don't care what they think of you.
yeah, I've
You've already passed their test, or they would have turned you off.
mm,
Just because they're willing to spend time with you, they want to spend the time right now with you.
Yeah.
No preparation needed.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
ready to go. Right. So if you answer the phone in a state of joy, what have you got to do but spread your joy?
Okay.
That's mudita.
mm,
That's mudita. Is spreading your joy. So make sure when you're doing your metta thing that you get a whole pile of it.
mm.
A whole big pile of joy.
Yeah, yeah. I've been
So
doing exactly that.
all right, so that you no longer dip it out with a teaspoon, you use a shovel
mm.
with a plan of a backhoe.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and be joyful. And when those thoughts come up that you shouldn't do this, or you're not good enough, or you're not good looking enough, and all of that kind of stuff, be sure to understand and give it its due that that is, in fact, your set of rites, rules, and rituals that you have been living by, and they don't work too well. They were built at another time for another reason and done ignorantly. And it wasn't your mommy and daddy's fault so much in both directions. One is much of it you put up together by yourself, and the other one is whatever they gave you, guess where they got it?
Their parents and it keeps
Right.
going back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we are literally a product of our past,
Mm.
right in built right into the DNA of who we are. But that's all that past stuff that was the construction crew and the material gatherers that built that scaffolding of rites, rules, and rituals. But now you're going to rebuild your rites, rules, and rituals with wisdom so that it's not so haphazard picking up this rule for this situation and that rule for that situation. And so the new rule is the Four Noble Truths in the sense of is this suffering? In other words, we become suffering snoops or dukkha snoop. I'm going to start using that. That's a good term. A dukkha snoop. We're going to be on the lookout for it because
Mm.
that's ultimately what we're doing. And the lookout, most of the dukkha we're going to see in our own mind. But in fact, when we get really quite good at it, seeing it in our own mind, you can begin to see it in others also. In their gestures, the way that they do things, when they're exasperated, the way they breathe, all
Yeah.
kinds of different cues.
And I've noticed when I see it in other people, if I'm very skillful, I can take them out of it, but it's quite tricky. But if my friend is like I have a friend who's a little self-conscious about her weight, and she doesn't it's not even a thing, but she's self-conscious about it, and so if I make fun of her about it, it almost pulls her out of it because she knows I'm doing it from a loving place. So that's
Precisely.
definitely something I would like to get a whole lot better at.
Practice, my boy, practice. That's what this is all about. That's even they call it meditation practice. This is actually part of the
Practice.
practice
Yeah.
of spreading that joy and learning how to do it. Because it's not a skill that you've got, it's a skill to be developed.
Mm,
And you've already gotten some confidence that you can do this.
yeah. Cool.
So really, basically, what we're talking about today is that you're beginning to recognize you've got some choice. These are new choices for you to do it the old way that we're in the habit of. That in fact, in that regard, that's the way Bhikkhu Buddhadasa defines karma. You're either going to live by your karma or you're going to make a new choice and live according to the moment based upon the elimination of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a whole new way of looking at the world rather than listening to all of these old rules. And so congratulations, you already got it. You went one step too far down right into fear, which is exactly what stuff comes from. But let's back up just a level and you'll begin to see this pile of rubbish called, well, gosh, it was mom and dad and the priest and the preacher and the teacher at school and half the kids and Aunt Susie, and I mean, there's just a whole mess of stuff in there, and we sometimes don't remember where it even came from. But all together, that stuff weaved a web of what we consider our environment or our society. And for each one of us did it the same way, ignorantly.
Mm. Yeah.
And some of those rules that kids were given were rules to make it easier for the parents, which would be like, don't play so much. Stop enjoying yourself. You're annoying too much.
Yeah, I really think you talked earlier about globalization, and I almost think it's it's starting to have the opposite effect, especially with the internet. I think kids that are growing up, whatever rules are given to them, they immediately are exposed through the internet to videos and images of people doing things differently and seeing, oh, hey, this other kid doesn't have to follow that rule. Why do I have to follow that rule? And it's interesting because these like just the video of the singing in public I've seen so many different kinds of videos of all different types of essentially rules and rituals being broken. So I don't know, I'm kind of it seems to me like an upward trend.
Yes, and I would call it going in the direction of freedom. The fewer rules we have, then the freer we feel. That the rules that we make for ourselves are rules that become our burdens. And that every young adult or teen wants to experiment with that because they feel the burden before they're fully adult yet. And so they're out searching for what should be my own good set of rules. But now that we've got the internet in the mix, things are beginning to explode because you find that kids are not just learning for themselves through their own experiments. They're getting the outcomes of many kids doing a whole lot of experiments.
Mm,
And
yeah.
we're beginning to see what a pile of this whole system is. And I would say good.
Yeah.
However, there are limits to it, and that is when these freedoms then turn in a way that it begins to hurt people. Let us hope that they can keep that wisdom eye open so that there's not much damage done. In other words, well, while we're in there cleaning the kitchen, let's not throw out the refrigerator.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
yet,
exactly.
and so in this regard, they've clean, please. This society really, really needs a good scrubbing down. One of the things that we need to begin to do is to see more holistically. And that, unfortunately, the word's got dirt all over it, but the word is social. That our society needs to be more social in the sense of cooperation with each other. And yet, socialism has become a dirty word, but it actually, the dirt of it is the rich people want to keep things separate because they want to keep their money. They don't want to have their money socialized. They don't want to distribute the wealth. And so you have these various classes of people that have natural reasons to be at war with each other. And so this is what you wind up as part of the mix of the society as whose belief system is right and whose is wrong.
Yeah.
And so a good Dhammarato is going to see through that too. That none of that is part of his business. His business is joy, gathering it together, keeping it going, keeping our own mind out of suffering, and spreading the joy to others. That's one primary goal as you progress through the knowledges. In fact, that delight that I'm talking about now could be said as the seventh knowledge. That when we after you've gone through all of the other steps, and by the way, recognition of dukkha and recognizing that that's our first job to do. That's step 4, or the fourth knowledge, because very few people are out looking for any hint of um, harming oneself. That people who are not into harming oneself generally don't drink alcohol, not even a little bit. And yet, look at how many people are out, even they become meditators, but they've also been in the habit of using alcohol, so they continue to do so because they're not really looking at the bottom of it in the sense of seeing the dukkha everywhere. And then to avoid it, we become to have a very clean or pure life because we're avoiding all kinds of things that we used to do because we could not see the danger therein. So this is quite an important step along the path of being able to see the danger. And then another step would be the dedication of the Dhamma. That this is about the only thing we care about. Nothing else is worth thinking about right now other than that. That stage then leads to the next one, which is eagerness, which is basically waking up that part of the child that you're talking about. They're becoming playful, becoming eager, becoming enthusiastic, becoming playful with it.
Yeah. And for me in particular, I think the word that really resonates is to be silly.
Okay.
Just to not have a goal in mind, to not have a problem to solve, but just to do things for the sake of doing them, or just say things for the sake of saying them.
This is all part of the path of giving up that part of the mind that goes around telling you what to do and how to feel. And in fact, by that method, controlling who you are and what you do, as opposed to, let us say, a wiser, more up to the minute, the frontal cortex part of the you then becomes in charge. So you begin to feel the way you want to feel, begin to think the kind of thoughts you want to think. Rather than being driven by thoughts and feelings, now you drive the thoughts and feelings. You use them almost as a vehicle. Think of it as like the feelings are very much like a horse that's untrained. But once you get the trained horse, or like if it's a car that's running around all over the place without a driver, the horse needs a rider and the car needs a driver. And so your job from the frontal cortex is to start driving your life, or riding it, riding that stallion, those feelings inside, so that you feel the way you want to feel, which is all about that metta and joy, because that's exactly how you want to feel.
Yeah. Okay.
So think about this. I think that you've got something going here.
Yeah, yeah, I know I do.
Pardon? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I said I know I do.
All right. Well, I hope that you call again soon and we'll talk again.
Yeah, have a good one. Stay safe.
Okay. We'll see you later.
Bye.
By the way,